And we're live. Red Pill, would you like to start us off and discuss what Red Pill is?
Okay. I'm Full Revolution from the Reddit forum. Uh, Basically, what Red Pill is sexual strategy for men. Um, and what I mean by this is it's really, I like to think of it as a database of information. A lot of people are confused on the blue pill side. They seem to think that Red Pill is advocating for something one way or another outside of sexual strategy, like, belief system outside of sexual strategy, but really it's not telling you to do anything one way or another. All Red Pill is information about women and sex and how those two things tie in together, and whatever it may be that the man is seeking, whether it be a long-term relationship, whether it be casual sex, it doesn't matter. That's what Red Pill is there for. It's for men to reach these goals, whatever they may be.
Okay. Maya, would you like to discuss Blue Pill for us?
Why, does Baker have nothing to add?
I mean, he went over it pretty well. I guess the only thing that I would really add is that on the Red Pill Women side, it's different because we have a different set of goals. Because the whole point, I mean, like the biggest thing on the Red Pill is that men and women are different and have different sexual strategies, and so the Red Pill Women sub is quite a bit different from the main sub in what our goals are, which on Red Pill Women is long-term relationships. That's about it.
Is it my turn?
Yes, it is indeed your turn.
Okay, so this will also be pretty short. Blue pill is mostly a reaction to red pill, obviously, I guess. And I think the type of reaction it is almost, I guess, an angry response. Because the red pill, a large part of the red pill is talking about what women are. And there is absolutely an underlying philosophy to the sexual strategy, so evolutionary psychology being a big part of it. And women read it, feminists read it specifically, and, you know, what's a better way to respond to it than make fun of it? And that's it.
Okay. Okay. Well, now we've kind of Red Pill. Can you go a little bit more in Red Evolution? Can you go a little bit more in depth as to what Red Pill actually describes, other than it's a sexual strategy form?
Sure.
You know, can actually get a little, like not necessarily get too technical, but just give broader overviews of the Red Pill philosophy and outlook on the world.
Sure. That's kind of a broad question, since Red Pill is kind of a conglomeration of game theory, like she referred to, evolutionary psychology, science, just observations about society, and how all these things come together, and really, for a lot of men, make getting sex, or whether it's getting sex or a relationship with a woman, makes it kind of an uphill battle, and Red Pill is there to sort sort of guide them and tutor them, on how to achieve these goals. So I can get into any one of those topics if you want to explore them more, but I don't really know how to expound on that more without going into one particular avenue. Because like I said, Red Pill is a lot of things. It's not just, one of those.
Okay.
Yeah, Red Pill Women is a little more narrow than that.
Would you care to?
I'm sorry, what?
Would you like to, go a little bit in depth?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, on the main sub, it's about, men can kind of use it for whatever it is they want, whether it's a relationship or one-night stands. But Red Pill Women focuses solely on relationships because, as far as our long-term sexual strategy goes, we have determined that sleeping around a lot in our 20s is not going to make us happy later in life because we'll be wasting our time on all these dudes and it'll be harder to find a quality man when we're ready for it. So basically it's just, and most of the women there are actually already married or in relationships, and so in that case it's just about maintaining a happy relationship that still has the spark to it, because most men are capable of, kind of keeping the spark alive, but what happens a lot is women have a tendency to kind of break a man down almost. Nothing intentional, but we just focus on remembering to be respectful, and if we want a dominant man, to play the complementary role to that rather than trying to fight him for dominance.
Okay. Seems pretty solid. Okay, I'm gonna open this up, this question up to discussion real quick. But do you think there could be any productive dialogue with more blue pill thinking and red pill thinking in terms of coming to a more holistic approach? I'm gonna give this one off to Red first. Then I'd like to hear Maya and then Baker.
Sure. To be honest, no, I don't really think that too much, understanding of either side will really come out of having discussion, because for the most part it seems as though neither, especially from my view, obviously I'm biased, but Blue Pill is really just unwilling to acknowledge, any salient points that Red Pill makes. So I don't really see any progress being made on that front, at least not in the near future.
Okay, but do you think there's points where Red Pill and Blue Pill could come to some form of consensus? Like, I'm not saying like now or with the Blue Pill subreddit, because obviously that's a bit of a circle, and I think we can all agree on that. So, like, do you think it's even possible on any of the terms, or what?
Well, see, the problem is that, Blue Pill to us isn't just the Blue Pill subreddit. It's really just mainstream, 2015 thinking about men and women and, how things should be between the two. So I really don't see any progress being made on either one of those fronts. Obviously, Blue Pill subreddit isn't going to change, and I don't see Blue Pill thinking at large really changing either. So I think by the time that Red Pill, any kind of Red Pill thinking is accepted into the mainstream, it'll probably be far too late by then. It won't even matter.
I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but I'd like to hear Maya's thoughts on this.
So I also don't think the purple pill matters. Partially because the red pill is, the red pill, it talks to itself, it talks to men. It is partially a sexual strategy sub, although I think there's a lot more to it than that. And I'm gonna pretend we're not talking about blue pill, but we're talking about feminism in general.
Well, blue pill and feminism aren't necessarily synonymous, so can we
no, there's just a correlation. Because
well, yeah, there's
yeah,
I mean,
because if you think, yeah, but because if you think about it, the blue pill, people who go on the blue pill spend so much time on the red pill, and at the same time, I think a person who really posts a lot on the blue pill wouldn't have agreed to be part of a podcast like this.
Agreed.
Sorry? Yeah. And no, I don't think a meaningful dialogue can exist because I think a big tenet of the red pill is women can't talk about women. Women don't know anything about women. So why would they listen to women? And I do think the blue pill is, for the most part, women. And the second thing I think is, I think feminism is also by women for women, although it doesn't purport to say too much about men. It's about women's emancipation. I don't think feminism is mainstream. I also...
I disagree.
And we can talk about
both of those.
I imagined you would disagree, considering you're the one who said that, and I'm disagreeing with you. So, no, it doesn't matter. I think I'm being mostly masochist, participating in this discussion and spending time on purple pill and reading stuff on the red pill. I read it and it makes me a little bit angry. And what? So no.
Baker, I'm going to go with you.
Okay. You said something about whether the sides could come to a consensus. And
anything, not necessarily 100%, just on certain topics or bits of agreement.
Well,
obviously
there's a lot of areas where the two sides can agree. I think that the reasonings are different, but as far as a big thing on the red pill is about looking and acting your best, which is, most people will tell you is pretty common sense stuff. The difference is that the red pill is a lot more specific on exactly how you can achieve these things, instead of just saying, oh, you need to be more attractive and that's how you get women, but you don't see a lot of, how do you become attractive to women. It's a little more detailed. But pretty much anyone can agree that working on yourself before getting into a relationship is important. And I think, at least for a lot of people on the blue pill, it's fine with them as far as individual lifestyle choices. There are some people who are just convinced that all red pill women are, abused, and all red pill men are just terrible people. But for the most part, it seemed, at least for the people who comment on purple pill, it seems like most of them are pretty okay with it as a personal lifestyle choice, and they only take issue when they feel like it's being prescribed is something that everyone should do and is the right thing for every person.
Okay. I'm going to try and refocus this and get more into what are points Blue Pill and Red Pill can agree on, or at least talk about without it devolving into you're wrong. And just, saying you're wrong and leaving it at that. Anyone want to go first on that? I mean, I'm just going off of what Baker said, because, a lot of what Red Pill talks about is, stuff that's not, some of it at least, like get in shape. That's pretty inoffensive and common sense stuff.
I think that's basically the extent of it. I mean, I can't really think off the top of my head anything else other than, comb your hair, whatever, wash your hair, and work out or, stay healthy. I mean, try and look your best. That's really where the only point of agreement. As soon as Red Pill makes any generalizations about how, to approach having sex with a woman or how to approach having a relationship and maintaining that relationship, that's where all bets are off, basically.
I think Maya wanted to say something.
Yeah, there is one thing I'm willing to agree with the Red Pill on, other than the generic, be more attractive thing. There is a lot of talk on the Red Pill about not putting women on pedestals, which is like 100% something I'll agree with. Nothing will make a woman run away faster than a dude deciding that she's perfect or she's amazing or he can't live without her. I mean, nothing is scarier. And I think the reason why that's so scary, like the reason why I find that scary, if a man were to do that, is because they completely lose sight of who I really am. And if they can't see me, then they can't respect me. I think a lot of the time, the Red Pill takes it in the opposite direction of you can't put women up on pedestals. You got to see them as below you, and you got to see them as something that's not worthy of respect. And that's where the criticism of the Red Pill is coming from.
Yeah, I don't really think that the intent of the Red Pill is to disrespect women. I really think it's just to accept female nature for what it is, accept hypergamy for what it is, realize that you're not gaining anything for yourself by putting women on the pedestal. You're really just hurting yourself. I think it's more, a lot of the anger and the vitriol that is linked on the Blue Pill is really just men, waking up to this realization, because I don't really think Blue Pill acknowledges that men have basically, most of us have been raised to see women with these sort of starry-eyed goggles and to always think the best of them. In every situation, we're told be nice to girls, don't ever hurt them, open the door for them, all these things. And so it's a harsh reality for a lot of men when they realize that all these things that they've been told, it's nice to pull the chair out for them, pay for their first date. All these things aren't actually, going to be necessarily reciprocated by women. With affection of any kind. So that's a harsh realization for a lot of men.
So just to quickly, I just want to put this out there. I think one of the things I learned from my not something I learned, but just an influence feminism has had on me is I don't like people paying for me on the first date. I don't let them pay for me on a first date as a rule. And I think that comes from feminism. And I think a lot of things that I guess a lot of things that just show. I mean, if the standard narrative is men need to protect women, men need to pay for them, open the door for them, pull out the chair for them, provide for them, that's the narrative that feminism attacks because it hurts women.
I would agree with you, but I would also say I see a lot of pop feminism that doesn't do anything to that effect. I mean, a lot of pop feminism seems to be like promote this notion that women are perfect. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of the women are wonderful effect, or the fact that both men and women have an in-group bias favoring women. Like, it's weird.
What does favoring mean?
There have been studies done that when you look at women and you just show them men and women random pictures of both men and women will find the women more trustworthy, safer, gentler, safer to be around, probably nicer. But so will the men. The men will also
break it
find
to
women
you, but women are safer to be around.
Well, and more trusting. And that's not necessarily, that's probably about the same between both genders.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, stereotyping exists. We do believe, people believe in stereotypes all the time.
Yeah. The other thing is the women are wonderful effect, which is a documented effect of people cutting women slack that they wouldn't necessarily cut a man, or thinking well of women in situations where they wouldn't necessarily think well of a man, or just, generally viewing women in the best light possible, generally speaking.
I'm gonna give you a chance to moderate, because I would love to get into this argument, but I don't think this is necessarily when we want to be having this argument. But your call.
Well, I think we pretty much covered the three main points of this podcast pretty early on, which was what is Red Pill, which is excuse me one moment. I think we pretty much covered the main points of this podcast pretty quickly into the podcast, and the tertiary point of does purple pill matter. So we're really more into an open discussion at this point. I was hoping for a little bit more conflict or discussion, but that got torpedoed pretty quickly. Yeah.
Can I kind of add on to something that Full Red was saying?
Have the floor.
Because he was talking about men kind of waking up and realizing that women aren't all they were brought up to believe they were. And as far as on the women's sub, there was a lot of kind of waking up that I did through there too, because I guess I always wanted kind of a traditional relationship sort of thing, but I didn't know how to get it. I guess because when I think of a dominant man, I think of a man dominating me and, just doing it. And I didn't really put thought into it being a two-way street. And so I think a lot of the most common advice you get is, communicate. It's all about communication. But that isn't the answer to every relationship issue. And so that's been really helpful for me, and that's another red pill thing, because people are taught, if your wife isn't attracted to you anymore, just talk to her. Just find out, what you need to do to make her attracted to you again. But that doesn't really work. As soon as, if my husband asked me, hey, what can I do to make you want to have sex with me, and I told him and he did it, I would just have in my mind that I told him to do it, and so it would completely lose all effect. And so it helped me as a woman to kind of understand my part in it to make both of us happy in a way that I hadn't seen really in any other forums. So, I mean, I understand, you know, the male anger when they sort of wake up and realize that women aren't all they thought, and there's not so much anger that you'll find in red pill women, but definitely it causes a lot more introspection in matters that we probably wouldn't really have thought about otherwise.
Okay. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think that I'm not going to disagree with anything that she just said. If you don't mind, though, I'd like to revisit maybe something that Maya mentioned, which is that feminism doesn't make any assertions about men. That I feel is totally inaccurate. I mean, you know, what do you really even have to say about the entire rape culture, you know, phenomenon that's going on right now? Um, the idea that all men are beasts, all men are out to take advantage of you, every man is a potential rapist. I mean, those are clearly assertions that feminism is making about men. And the second thing I wanted to mention was she made the point that feminism is not mainstream. And I mean, I just don't really understand how you could get that idea, because it seems to me that feminism is completely dominating the mainstream culture right now. I mean, you can see it, you know, the evidence in pretty much anyone's social circle. I mean, you know, a trend I've noticed is that basically if you make any sort of feminist assertion in public, even in the workplace, espouse any feminist ideals, you know, no one can challenge you. Because to challenge that would be to be seen as politically incorrect and, you know, basically be blackballed, you know, especially if it's in a work context. I mean, feminist ideals are really the only ideals that are accepted in the mainstream. So I really don't see how you could possibly make the assertion that feminism is not mainstream.
So I'll address the whole. Let's start with feminism saying that all men are rapists. I don't see that. I mean, the response to so for a while there was talk of like when the Yes Means Yes campaign was first taking ground, and a lot of men were piping up, a lot of people rather on Twitter were piping up with, you know, not all men are rapists, and like, no shit, not all men are rapists. If I really thought that, if most feminists were really thinking that, we'd be living in a cupboard and never leaving, like locking the door, wearing chastity belts. And that's why the response to it was, the response to not all men was yes, all women. Because it's not a question of, I mean, like even the term patriarchy, it's not about all men being bad. It's about there being a system, a structure where women are constantly kept away from being decision makers and having agency. That's what patriarchy is. That's where feminism comes into play, which is why I was saying it's mostly women talking to women. But when it comes to rape culture specifically, all women experience some. I mean, chances are any woman you'll ever talk to will have experienced some form of sexual harassment or sexual assault, if not rape. That doesn't mean all men do this. It means that one man can go and harass a bunch of women, which is what men who are going to be rapey, for lack of a better adjective, I mean, that's what they will do. They'll target a lot of different women. And
just like,
that's and I mean, I think you'll be hard pressed to find a mainstream modern feminist who says anything other than what I'm saying right now.
Not long ago there was a Teach Men Not to Rape campaign that sounds decidedly anti-male, and I can bring up statistics showing the level of female to male rape if you include made to penetrate as a form of rape.
I can't hear you too well, Tori.
Okay. If not too long ago there was a feminist campaign called Teach Men Not to Rape. And on that campaign,
okay, you know what? Sorry,
well,
I'm not going to cut you off, but we've had this conversation before. Those campaigns were a response to the campaigns teaching women how to not get raped. There were lists going around, there were articles going around that had a lot of suggestions for women on how to avoid rape. Well, I don't think telling women things like, oh, you know, maybe you shouldn't go up to that dude's apartment if he seems dangerous. Like, sure, it's almost obvious advice. It's things you don't need to tell people, I think. But it doesn't matter. A lot of the advice on those kinds of lists that were going around for a while, it just wasn't good advice. The Teach Men Not to Rape campaign was a response to the fact that there was advice around going around telling women not to dress like sluts, because if they dress like sluts, they'll get raped, which is statistically not correct. I do think there is value in education that talks about what consent looks like. But I find it weird. I find it bizarre that men see these kinds of things, like, you know, talk about consent and yes means yes, and, you know, don't rape, and they take it as like an assault on their personality because someone is thinking they might rape, except some men do rape. It is a thing that a lot of women have to deal with. I just don't get it.
Red, you were gonna say something, then I'll give Maya time to respond.
I mean, I just think that teach men not to rape is really just kind of a silly thing to go with, because most men, the vast majority of men, do not rape, and it's almost like the same thing with the focus on male against female domestic violence. I mean, there's a very little known statistic that I think it's something like 45%, even 46% of victims of domestic violence are actually men.
Actually, Red, if I could just interrupt, it's actually about 50-50, and women tend to initiate about 70% of the time. And the only statistical difference between bidirectional and unidirectional domestic violence is whether or not the man reciprocates the attack. So about 70% of the time, it's actually started by women. The feminists claim that women tend to get hurt more is factually correct, just due to, sexual dimorphism and stronger.
Right.
So that is also true.
But I'm not surprised at all to hear you say that women, would initiate 70% of those cases, because there's really, we teach women that it's okay for them to hit men. I just want to
clarify one last thing. In cases of unidirectional violence, 70% of the time women are the perpetrators, and I just wanted to clarify that, and the only difference is whether or not the guy hits back. if you look at statistical studies, there's like over 300 of them. Anyway, continue.
Right. So I just don't really see the need for this. I think that while maybe I don't know what the advice was given, telling what women should do in order to not get raped, I think that that advice was probably well-meaning. Maybe if it was actually the quality wasn't there, but I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, you know, here's how you can minimize your chances of getting raped. I mean, we do not live in a utopian society. Bad things do happen to people, and it's just like if someone were to tell me, hey, don't walk in the middle of the night through Harlem, you know, that's just sort of common sense, and I don't really see any problem with reiterating that to people, because I guess some people need that.
Like a knife or something.
So let me mirror your argument then. I mean, what's so bad then about telling men that that they shouldn't have sex with someone if that person has explicitly agreed to it? I mean, I'm sure most men know it, but I don't see what's wrong with reiterating it. It's good advice.
The problem is that most sexual encounters are far more murky than that, and a lot of times where...
And that's why this kind of education is so important, though. That's why we need to have very explicit, a very explicit standard for what consent looks like and what isn't consent.
Yeah, but the problem is that your standards, or I should say feminist standards of consent, is absolutely ridiculous. They don't coincide with reality. That's just the facts. I mean, their standard of consent is insane. It's gotten to the point where men are basically saying, well, maybe you should just like write up a contract and have people sign it before they have sex. I mean, the other things I've... Go ahead.
Red. Okay, I'm going to step in here because I kind of know what mine is getting at. So there's issues with the affirmative consent standard. No doubt. It's just not realistic. It doesn't really help anything, and it flips the burden of proof. That being said, there are consent standards that would help a lot in the dialogue. The problem is that we as a society aren't ready for them. And one that would help a lot would be the negotiated consent standard, which is basically before sex is even on the table, you just say, hey, what do you want to do? Like, what don't you want to do? Like, where you kind of about, and then you go and you do it. But we're not there yet because...
But guess what?
Like, as a society, by and large...
But we'll never be there. Yeah. And the reason we'll never be there is because that is not how you have sex with a woman. That's just not... It's not how it works 9 times out of 10. In order to have sex with a woman, you can't say, hey, is it cool if, you suck my dick? Is it cool if I touch your clit? Like, that's not how it goes.
We're not talking,
women want to have this idea that things just happen. Things just happen magically.
Look, then it's time for us to change things. Like, this is something where the law shouldn't this isn't something where, well, some women, or even for that sake, a lot of women don't want to talk about sex and they don't want to give consent, so we should just make rape legal suddenly, or we should change the definition of rape so a lack of explicit consent doesn't make it rape. Except no, we should make moves towards having a society that is open to talking about sex and is open to the idea of people talking to each other about sex. I think a big part of the reason why women feel uncomfortable saying no but also saying yes and giving direction is because they're encouraged to not talk about sex. There aren't platforms for young men and women to talk about sex in explicit terms when they're growing up. So we end up with a bunch of young adults who can't for the life of them express what they'd like and what they wouldn't like. add to that the fact that uh, women are socialized to be more agreeable and to avoid conflict, and you end up with a ton of people having sex that is not consensual. And one party doesn't even know it. And the idea that, oh no, but women don't want to talk about, women don't want to give, that's absurd. Give us more agency than that.
But women don't want agency. They want the ability to.
Oh really? Tell me more about what women want. I'd love to learn from you, Red.
Well, sure. I'll be happy to inform you. Women want the ability to retract consent. I mean, this has been documented numerous times. I can, if you want me to, later on, send you a whole bunch of information about times that men, two people get drunk, they have sex, and then the next morning the woman decides, did I get raped? I'm not really sure. I guess I did. I'm going to go talk to my friends about it, and then it gets taken before a council, a school council, and they decide that only the man is at fault. Well, if they're both drunk, then it seems to me that hold on, let me finish my I'm going to finish my point. Excuse me. That if both are drunk, both are unable to give consent, and they should both be expelled. In a ideally feminist society, that's how it would go down. If you're going to follow, your logic.
Okay, if we're going to talk about an ideally perfect feminist society, this kind of situation wouldn't happen in the first place because both parties would know that they are probably too intoxicated to have sex, and it wouldn't happen in the first place.
That's not reality.
But you know what? No, but anyway, there's no one who's advocating for a retraction of consent, and I think.
Really? Are you sure?
I'm sure there are a few people running around saying that, but liberal mainstream, the strand of feminism that is more mainstream than other strands of feminism is definitely not saying that. In addition to that, I legitimately don't think that unless someone is blackout drunk, in which case, I get there does need if both parties are blackout drunk and somehow had sex with each other, there needs to be. I mean, neither party can give good evidence, and for one side or the other needs to be some sort of investigation, I guess. But if both parties are drunk enough that they can have sex easily, I think they're also drunk enough to give. I mean, I think they're also not that drunk that they can't give consent.
I mean, I don't know if you've been to college, but blackout sex is by any means not uncommon. It happens all the time, and I think that is a huge contributing factor. This exact bias that I'm speaking about is a huge contributing factor to this rape culture hysteria.
I think the idea that blackout sex or both parties are blackout drunk, that just doesn't.
Welcome to 2015. I mean, I really don't know what to say to you. Welcome to America. I mean, I don't know where
in that case, even then, there needs to be some sort of investigation into the subject. And some schools have more rigorous judging panels. Some schools don't. Some schools will not expel anyone for having multiple people come up against them with charges of rape. I mean, do I see the solution being somewhere in the middle? Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. Well, I mean, since we're on the topic of consent and rape, we might as well just hammer out Well, I'm going to start with red because we always hear a lot about what feminists say about what consent looks like. I want to hear what Red Pill says, what consent looks like, and then I'm going to punt it back to Maya.
What does consent
So-
look like?
Yeah, as a red pillar, what does consent look like? Define
I mean-
consent. How do you know when you
Yep.
have consent?
Okay. Well, I would say that what qualifies as consent is given that both parties are not intoxicated under mind-altering drugs. If both parties are enjoying the interaction that they're having, and neither party explicitly states or makes a physical move to stop the interaction. So either you have two modes of canceling it. You can say, no, I don't want to do this. I'm not into this. Or you can I mean, whatever, punch them in the face or whatever. I mean, if it's really that bad, I mean, there's options that you have for making it clear. But if you begin an interaction and then at any point one party doesn't want to continue, then the onus is upon them to speak up. It's not okay to just, well, I'm secretly not okay with this, but I'm just going to go along. Like, that doesn't work. You have to say something. You have to do something. Given that the person isn't holding a knife to your throat or something, I mean, obviously that's not consent then. But like, you have to make it clear that you are no longer, once you began sexual intercourse, whatever you want to call it, the person who doesn't want to be a part of the interaction has to make it clear that they don't want to be a part of it anymore. Because otherwise, the other person has no way of knowing that. I think that's the only logical way that you can go about it.
Yeah, my standard of consent is a lack of a no. If the other person doesn't indicate that they're not into it, then that's on them. I don't see that as non-consensual.
I think there needs to be an explicit yes at the start. I actually don't, except for that part, I do think a yes needs to be something that is expressed explicitly. I'm not going to say verbally, but a nod of the head or whatever. And I think as far as specific sexual acts go, so penetrative sex versus oral sex, especially when, not like every thrust needs to be consented to. That's a red herring, I think. But I do think explicitly saying whether penetrative sex is okay or whether it's only going to be like a heavy makeout session or if it's only going to be oral sex, I do think those things need to be said explicitly. And once the consent's been given, yeah, of course, the onus is on the person who wants to retract the consent to say that verbally. I mean, of course.
How do you jive that with many times women have expressed that, oh well, I really wish that he wouldn't just ask me for this or do this or that. I wish he would just take it. That's what I'm into. Like I
They need
don't
to get
understand.
the fuck over themselves and stop wishing.
But this is like female sexuality. Like, I don't see how your standard is just, I mean...
Yeah, I'll tell you, I mean, here's the thing. It's really convenient to, Okay, I'm sorry, let me go back to it. I wish for a lot of things. I wish I could eat chocolate for every meal, and no, actually, that's probably the extent of it. I just wish I could eat chocolate for every meal. And some women also have straight-up rape fantasies. I mean, it's a fact of the matter. I think it doesn't stop the fact that rape shouldn't be legal, because the off chance that a woman might not prefer to have things said out in the open, I don't think that legitimizes rape. And
But
whoever
what I'm
that woman
saying
is
if
will have to get
every
over the fact that her desires are rightfully illegal.
if every sexual interaction needs to begin with a yes, then it seems to me like a whole bunch of women are never going to have sex, because every time a man has to say, "Can I stick my dick in you, please, babe?" their pussy's going to dry up like the Sahara. So I really
Well, I mean,
don't.
if that's how you're going to say it to me.
Uh,
I mean,
What would that look
I'm just
like
being
to you?
real.
hold on.
I'm being
Can I
real. I
just-
mean that.
I do think there are
Okay.
explicit expressions of consent that are not necessarily verbal. I will put that out
Okay.
there. Something like
So it seems you
if
changed your position.
if a woman were to hand a condom to a guy, that's very specific.
What if she just wants to give a blowjob with a condom on, and she's just a real party pooper?
Um,
Then that's consent oral sex right there.
I'm just saying, it seems to me your argument's pretty wishy-washy. That's
I-
I know it's funny, but I'm just pointing it out. That's all.
Okay, let me just slip in here real quick and try and I do tend to agree with Red that if you don't say no, and there's at least some semblance of it. I mean, you kind of have to speak up. You can't just assume your partner's a migrant or assumes you're not into it unless it's pretty obvious that you're clawing or punching at them. That's pretty obvious signs of lack of consent.
Yeah, if you can't say no and stand up for yourself, then that's not how is that on the other person?
Yeah. But I will say this. Talking out before sex is on the table is probably a better method. And I know it. And the problem is, in today's society, that's not happening. And we need to design consent standards around the fact that people aren't taking a step back and saying, hey, what works for you? Hey, what's working for you? And people aren't doing that. So we have to create rational consent standards to take into consideration the fact that people aren't stepping back and saying, hey, what does consent look like? Hey, what do I want out of this interaction? Because people aren't just going to go to a bar and then go home and be like, okay, so what do you want? As you're driving back to the other person's place, what are you looking for out of this interaction? People aren't having that discussion, which kind of means that you have to be an active and participatory person in that act to be able to say no, at least from my point of view. And so with that, I'm going to reopen the question to Maya to give a more realistic standard given the society we live in. Not necessarily the standard that necessarily should be there, but the standard that would work within the constraints of our current society.
So you want me to pull my standard back so that suddenly my standard becomes more permissive, less strict over what
well, no, you know me. I tend to agree with your standard wholeheartedly. I tend to agree with your standard wholeheartedly, Maya. The problem is the society that we live in. It's not going to happen right now. It might happen in the future, but it's not working with the society we have now. So, would you like to...
Yes. If that happens in the future, I am so glad that I'm married, because that sounds like the worst sex ever, to negotiate ahead of time.
Well, it's more like saying boundaries. Yeah.
I think I'd call what you're saying, Purple. I'd call it the BDSM standard of negotiating consent, because that's what it is. That's what good BDSMers do. Which is super important, because BDSMers do things that are so outside what normal sex life.
Usually pretty dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was pretty much just my point. Was that would it be a consent standard that people that are in more mainstream society could use that wouldn't necessarily be so stringent?
I still think a yes needs to be mandatory, and I think a big part of it is that, I mean, like from the red pill, the response to that is, well, if that was the case, we would never be having sex, which is sad. I mean, it's sad that asking your partner, would you like me? Would you like it if I I don't know, would you like it if I went down on you? Would you like it if I put my dick in you? Like the fact that the chances of getting a no from your partner is reasonable question. Now the reason why we have to have these stringent, these more stringent definitions, and why it shouldn't be a lack of a no equals yes, is that power structures exist. Women are socialized to be agreeable. People in general are socialized to not talk about sex. And if we have education that is based around what consent looks like and what consent is, and if we teach kids that it's okay to talk about sex, I think it'd be very easy to move on to a culture where, no one pipes up with, oh no, if I ask her, she'll say no. Because, I mean, Red, what else stops you from asking a woman if she'd like you to have sex with her? If not the fear that she'll say no, if not the fear that she won't give you that consent. And if you're afraid of a no, then you are a potential rapist. Because you'd rather just avoid the potential of hearing a no.
I don't really think it all has to do with women, being shamed out of their sexuality or whatever. I mean, I think part of it is that women just don't find it sexy, like Baker was saying, to have all this, contractual, discussion about sex.
I mean,
it
can be sexy.
I just want to
dirty
step
talk
in
is
here.
super hot.
I just want to step in here just for a sec. Even in BDSM, checking in too often is frowned upon. It's you should know your partner well enough and be able to read, their body language to know, roughly where you're at. So even in BDSM, even with the consent standard, it's still frowned upon to check in too frequently.
But here's the thing. So I see, as far as what, okay, that's that idea we brought up. Some women just want to be taken. That's power play. That should fall under BDSM, and that should be discussed way in advance. The whole idea of why BDSMers need to talk about everything in advance is because you need to plan a dangerous scene out without pulling the person you're with out of the scene.
I fully understand. I fully understand that, and the problem is a lot of the women that have those power play fantasies, they aren't in touch with the scene, they don't know how to discuss them, or they're unwilling to discuss them with their partners. Or saying what Baker had said about, if I tell him what turns me on, then it won't turn me on anymore. Something to that effect. And I think that's a potential problem. Hello?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a risk that some people will have to take.
I have a question for you, Maya.
Okay.
A risk that men will.
So would you actually consider it rape if there isn't an explicit yes?
I do think context matters. Maybe some things wouldn't rape, they'd be sexual assault. Maybe some things, I mean, not an implicit yes, but a physical yes. But I think if one party is inexpressive, non-expressive, and the other party never asks for consent, I think that's rape. Maybe it shouldn't be prosecuted as rape. Maybe legally it shouldn't be considered rape. Maybe legally it should be considered some form of sexual assault. But I think that's rape, yes.
Okay. I mean, I was just curious what your take on that was, because to me, if there wasn't a no, then at worst it's like an unfortunate situation.
I think we need to change the dialogue in that case. So there are no, so it stops being things are unfortunate situations because things were unclear. I mean, the problem, I think the problem with surrounding rape specifically is that it's more important that it just doesn't happen than talking about what happens after the fact and what legal standards are. So I think it's really, really important that people learn to fucking talk about it. And that's it. And I think that's more important than should that legally be considered rape. Although that's important just because, I mean, legally it's important. But we all live in different states or countries. So, I mean, I'm sure that for each one of us, the way our local government defines rape is different.
Yeah, I would just have to say that I think it has to do with female sexual nature more so than it does with, a cultural need to suppress female sexuality. I
I
think,
don't think it has anything to do with female sexuality. I think it just has to do with cultural norms. And keep in mind, like, this is largely a U.S.-centric show, a U.S.-centric or Canadian-centric show at this point. We don't really have anyone that's off the continent talking. And, I mean, here's the thing. Like, we're fundamentally Puritan in nature. So,
yeah, I mean, that may have been
I mean,
this country's origin, but I don't really see much Puritanism. I mean, I think that is pretty much dying out.
oh, I agree, it's dying out, but it's not there yet, and I think that's part of the problem for part of this talking about sex, because, I mean, I can assure you that in poly and kinky communities, we don't have nearly these problems at all. You know,
Right, but we aren't all part of the
so
poly community. Most of us.
no, and I understand that most people aren't, and that's why I was going to Maya with. I don't think those standards of consent are going to work for the rest of society, and I don't think we're anywhere near the point where they would begin to work for the rest of society. And that, I mean, that's my issue with those standards of consent, is most of society isn't ready to even have that conversation, let alone use those standards of consent. You know, and I think Maya would agree.
I mean, yeah, I would agree. That's why I think we need to make those the standards. Society is not just going to evolve into better standards.
You have to start the discussion, though, before you can set those standards. and we're nowhere near a point where we can have that discussion.
Well, we got to get there quick.
So starting out with we started out with what is red pill, what is blue pill, and does purple pill matter? And we're coming close to the hour, so we're getting ready to close this all out. That being said, I'd like to propose the question, just a closing thoughts type of question. Where would you like to see society head? And since I've been favoring red a little bit on this discussion panel, I think I'm going to give this one to Maya to go first.
I'd like to see society head towards a standard where we don't see people as by their genders. If you're willing to accept the gender as purely a social terminology, so you can still have the female sex or the male sex, but your gender is something that that is more mental and is more social, and something that, I mean, people change, and right now they do. I mean, trans people taking hormones, that kind of stuff. I think the end goal of feminism, or at least specifically my feminism, is a society that stops acknowledging gender as a thing. So, as an example, the argument that's happening on Purple Pill right now about whether women should have lower standards for joining the Marines, or should there just be standards across the border. That should, I mean, that should just, one standard across the board. And no, so the conversation, I mean, what do women think? What do women, no, just what are people like? However, I don't think we're even close to being there yet, because as it stands right now, women are viewed as the inferior, and up until we don't have equality between the genders, I don't think we can eliminate gender. Although I think society will benefit from one day eventually eliminating gender.
Okay, I'm going to ask Baker to go next.
I mean, the only thing that I really think about as far as what I would like to see in society moving forward is just more personal accountability. I mean, if it wouldn't be a problem if women did say, no, I'd rather you not do that. And I mean, like I touched on before about the things I learned in Red Pill Women about doing my part in having the kind of relationship I want. There's a lot of kind of blaming other people when you go to ask advice and you complain about your significant other or whoever. A lot of times, the first thing you're going to hear is kind of, commiserating with you or agreeing or, trying to say, basically agreeing with you in some sense about the other person and sort of making it about them, when the first question I think should be, well, what are you doing about it? What can you do? Because you can't change other people. And I think that there's a really big lack of personal accountability right now. And within feminism, I think there's a lack of personal accountability.
Okay. that seems pretty solid. Red, I'm going to leave it with you.
All right. Well, first off, I'll say I'm just not optimistic. I don't really think anything. The things I'm saying right now will probably happen within the near future, but really, I would just like to see, if anything, an acceptance of male and female sexual nature in the mainstream, and just really make peace with that and be okay with making, generalizations, but still understanding, of course, there's always exceptions, but people knowing that it's okay, for people to be, I guess, in tune with their, normal sexual nature, for lack of a better word. That's it.
Okay, and I'm just waiting on my fucking flying cars. Where the fuck are they? It's been like 50 years. Where the fuck are those fuckers? That's a society I want. Flying goddamn cars. Okay, I think we've had a interesting discussion. I don't know how productive it was, but we've had an interesting discussion, and I think that's all that really matters. So, with that being said, I think I'm going to close this out. If anyone has any final comments, thoughts, concerns. No. Okay.
Nope.
Well, I want to thank our panelists for coming on. So thank you for that. I want to thank our viewers, all 9 of you, for sticking with us. We're still working through the format and whatnot, but I appreciate you tuning in. So thank you. Everyone have a good night, safe week, and we'll see you probably about next week or so. Thank you. Good night and good luck.